one thing people don't do enough of, I think, is actually talk about parenthood before they become a parent.
Clara, I'm going to come to you for some coaching. I love what you're talking about.
Hi there, I'm Jordan, host of PeopleFirst, the Young Careers podcast. On today's episode, we're looking at what it's like to return to work after parental leave. In this episode, we want to give space to the realities of returning to work after having children, particularly for women. If you're listening to this, perhaps you're coming to the end of your maternity leave and worried about going back to work. Or maybe you're a working parent and looking for advice on climbing the ladder. To discuss all of this, I'm joined by two fantastic guests today. Clara Wilcox, career coach for parents and owner of the Balance Collective, and Clara Morgan, head of business performance at ManpowerGroup Deutschland. Welcome to the show, Clara and Clara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, can you give us some background to both yourselves and what led you here today? I'm going to start with you, Clara.
So I've been working in the skills space for over 20 years now. Started off in recruitment, then went into higher education, skills project management, and then went out on my own about 9 years ago.
Nice.
And really the catalyst for that was my girls. So I've got an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old, and found the transition back into work after both of my girls tricky. And that was even with a really supportive organisation and a really supportive team. Especially with my youngest 12 years ago, had some career coaching and he was wonderful, but not quite what I wanted.
Okay.
So I did what a lot of people do and I became that person. So I became qualified as a coach in 2017 and then started the Balance Collective, and I'm here now.
Well, we're really lucky to have you with us. And Clara, I know you. We've
Yeah.
met, but can you give the listeners a bit of an insight into you and your role in ManpowerGroup?
Certainly. Well, actually, this week is quite a special week for me, Jordan. Tomorrow, I will have worked 23 years for ManpowerGroup.
Wow.
And this actually means half my life working for ManpowerGroup. So from there, you can work out my age. So I started as a recruitment consultant in our Leicester branch for the Brook Street brand, which is part of ManpowerGroup. And I would say that was probably the first proper job that I had, and I've worked for ManpowerGroup ever since in different roles. So in our recruitment teams, managing a region, in learning and development, and now more recently I'm working for the German part of the business, so working internationally, which is really interesting. And during that time I've had 3 children, so they are 11, 9 and 7 now. So it's something really close to my heart to talk to people, particularly people younger than me coming into the business, to say, I've done it, I've had my children, I've maintained my career. So I'm really pleased to be here today to talk about this topic.
Well, I'm delighted to have you both. Today, we really want to speak to those women who are at the beginning of their motherhood journey. Can you both take us back to your maternity experience and what it was like for you both?
Shall I start?
Let's go, Claire.
I'm going to be really honest
Go
here.
on, we want the honesty.
And I hope you're not going to judge me on this.
I would never, ever, ever judge.
So I found it an absolute shock. And also I felt guilty about finding it a shock as well. So, and Clara, you strike me as quite similar to me, but I was somebody who was really used to being in control, to planning my day, to knowing exactly what I was going to be doing, to, managing projects and coordinating things, and really feeling as if, I could decide what happened, during my working day. And of course, you have all these wonderful images of maternity leave, and it's going to be wonderful. And, I'm going to have time, I had so much time, I'm going to do this. I'll tell you a story. We had a family member gave us this old rocking horse that had belonged to my husband's family, and he'd had it in the house when he was, a child. And we had it, and I thought, oh, wow, that is such a wonderful project to do on maternity leave, because I'm going to have all this time. I can refurbish that, and maybe we'll get a puppy as well, and we can, I'm going to be like this earth mother that can do so many things. And I have to tell you, it was an absolute shock. So having a new baby, also being someone who's used to enjoying their sleep as well. And, we talk about this quite a lot. But having a new baby, I think 2 weeks into my maternity leave, I had an absolute meltdown. And I said to my husband, I can't do this. I want to go back to work right now. So probably the opposite of what you might expect. But I found it really difficult. And my husband talked me down and said, well, just give it a little bit more time. And I did. I learned to embrace it. But I think nobody really talks about that absolute shock. So particularly if you've, if your identity is connected with your job, and if you're used to being organised and, having a sense of control in what you do, it's such a change that I think we should be more open about, and, so that people expect it. And I always make a point when I'm talking to, people in the business who are going on maternity leave, I always make a point of saying, look, you're somebody who's really used to organising your day. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Just be prepared. So, yeah, I'm probably not what you would expect from the beginnings of motherhood. But, yeah, all honesty, it's just a circle of trust here, isn't it?
It is a circle of trust. It's just us here. No one's going to be listening to it, so they aren't. What would you add? Would you say the same, Clara?
I'd say the same, but actually it played out differently. So my eldest is 18.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I could only have 6 months off.
Okay.
So I actually went back when she was 5 months old, and I was just coming out of what is now called the fourth trimester.
Mm-hmm.
So sleep was a massive issue. I was so shocked, I think, more with my second maternity leave. And I think quite often when we think about maternity leave, we always think about the first as if that anything that happens in the future is just going to be a cut and paste, and it wasn't. So the first was very much like, I remember my manager saying, you won't take the full 6 months, you'll be back after 3. And I was like, well, that sounds like a challenge. Came back after 5 months. She was so little, whilst with my youngest, I had 53 weeks off. So I was working in the public sector at the time. My daughter was 6.5, so I had to leave the house. With your first, you can cocoon yourself away. Mm-hmm. You can stay in your pajamas all day and just sort of, the earth mother element can be there. But I couldn't with my youngest. And what really shocked me was how much I enjoyed that lifestyle. And I didn't expect that. I really enjoyed stepping off the hamster wheel, to be blunt. And that was even
It's a really good analogy, to be honest with you. Yeah.
I had a really good network of friends. I was very lucky, I think, sort of conveniently both times with my girls. I had a lot of close friends having children at the same time. So we got to see each other. It was this wonderful, because of the age gap, I was in a much better financial position with my second. We had 2 losses, hence the age gap.
Sorry to hear that.
We'd been saving for 3 years, basically, on top of having a public sector parental leave policy as well. So I was in a situation where found the second really, really difficult, because I loved being at home, which I never, and I grieved. When I went back, I grieved thinking I'd never have that time again.
Yeah.
And again, that's something we don't talk about, that sort of the duality of I can love my job and I can love being at home.
Yeah.
And actually that was a massive shock for me.
And what was one thing that you maybe didn't see coming with motherhood?
The fact that you never get it sorted. And what I mean by that is we spend so much time thinking about getting pregnant and then having a baby, and you forget you've got a person.
Yeah.
And every single time you think you have it cracked, that their routine, their responses, something will happen. And actually that never stops. You grow and develop as a parent in the same way that your child grows and develops as well. And that's something I think, again, that isn't really considered. We focus so much on the early years, we forget that you're a parent forever.
Yeah.
I think, and just to add to that, I think I was surprised, because I thought I was quite a resilient person before motherhood, but I think motherhood gives you so much more resilience. I mean, the situations you find yourself in, just purely a baby with a full nappy and you've got no nappies or no wipes, and how you're going to deal with that, silly things, but just being able to, you've got to get a grip and you've just got to carry on, when you're in charge of another person, and you just have to make it through the day and keep a smile on your face. Mm-hmm. And I think it also taught me to be a lot more positive. So, you've just got to keep the ship going. You have challenges and you've just got to keep calm and carry on, as they say. And I think that was a real sort of personal growth for me in terms of my personal development. And I didn't expect that really to come from motherhood. But looking back, when you think about the person that you were before you had your first child, and certainly the person I am now, I can really see how good it's been for me, even though it was really tough at the beginning and I found it, quite difficult. So, I mean, like you, I went on maternity leave again, Clara, and actually I wondered what the fuss was I'd made the first time I had my children, my first two 18 months apart.
Irish twins.
So I'm an only child, and I was really determined not to have an only child.
Right.
So hence the very tight age gap. But that was really difficult. So having a toddler and a newborn, I was thinking, wow, that was a walk in the park last time. Why was I making so much fuss about it? All my toddler wanted to do was find out what the baby's eyes were made of.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just, little things like that, protecting
challenging,
the baby
I'm
from the toddler.
sure.
What does the toddler need? So, yeah, that was pretty tough. But, of course, you've got to weigh it up. They're, very close together in age, and, they have a great relationship.
Yeah.
But at the time, that was quite tough. And again, I wasn't expecting how difficult that would be.
Yeah, I can see that. My mum looks after 3 of us, and she must shudder every time the phone rings because she must just think, what's next,
It never stops.
It doesn't. And we used, all 3 of us in school, we were within 4 years of each other, the 3 of us, and we all wore glasses. And she said whenever the school rang, she used to know, like, just see the money jingling in her ears because she knew something was broke or someone's lost something or whatever. So I have solidarity with her now listening to you.
That is actually another change, as you mentioned that, because you have to completely lose any sort of precious feeling you have over any of your possessions.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just my children that will break stuff. But yeah, certainly you sort of lose some of your material instinct because you're just thinking this is going to get ruined and broken.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And going back to the returning to work after maternity, what were your main sort of fears around that? And did they play out that way?
Oh my God, I don't know about you, Clara, but I just thought my brain's not going to work. I've been in the baby space and I had, really gone for it. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I had is go to the baby groups, make your network, meet people. So I was in that zone and, chatting about baby stuff, but mostly baby stuff. So thinking, okay, I'm going to go back to my job and I need my brain to be working. I need to be able to, coordinate things. I need to be able to look professional.
Yeah.
So I think, your personal appearance can slip a little bit as well. So, do my clothes fit me? If somebody asks me a question, am I going to be able to respond? How quickly will my brain work if I'm trying to work out how to do something? So big anxiety.
Yeah.
That can I be that person that I was before I went on
yeah.
maternity leave? And am I going to be a disappointment? Are people going to think, oh, she can't do the job as well as she did? So yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
It completely, it was all about the worry about losing my edge and what was my professional identity. But I think part of that came from work wasn't the most important thing for me anymore. It was a massive part of my identity. You'd meet somebody and, everyone asks, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do? Oh, I'm a branch manager of a recruitment consultancy, or I lead the largest this, that and the other in the West Midlands. So that was a real shift, but that came back.
Yeah.
That came back very quickly. And actually what was so interesting for me is that it not being the most important thing meant I actually became better in my work. Like I wasn't as anxious about what people thought about me anymore. I took more risks. But yeah, the clothes thing was massive, especially with my first, because I was barely out of maternity wear at sort of 6 months. But it was missing my girls as well.
Yeah.
That was a massive thing for me. I had a great childminder for my eldest, and my mum also looked after her, and my mum actually stepped back from work to look after my youngest. And actually, there is all of this guilt, I suppose, in terms of they're doing all these fun things when I'm not around. But actually, when I look back now, they were doing things that I probably would have never done with them.
Of course.
So actually, it was great seeing the bond that was developed. And actually now, I suppose, I sit here having an adult child, which still blows my mind that that is the case. But actually, when we look back and talk about things, she has some amazing memories of those people and those times and those activities, and a real pride in seeing me as a working parent.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, 100% that, that idea of like, who am I now? Can I do this? Is massive part.
And she will feel that pride. I remember my mum going back to work a couple of years ago and seeing the person that she was then and now is different. And she gave up her career to look after us. And I'm just so glad that she now has like her own person, if that makes sense. And I think throughout this podcast, I'm probably going to appreciate her a little bit more after speaking to you. But Clara, you created the Balance Collective, a coaching service for parents. What are some of the struggles parents come to you with and how do you help them?
So, massive part around the mental load, balance, identity, confidence. They all come to me with a similar message of, I don't quite know who I am anymore.
Okay.
And that might be they're judging themselves on the expectations that they had before they had children, or they're coming along and saying, actually, you know, I want more for myself.
Sure.
You know, there's quite often an expectation or an assumption that parents want to slow down, but sometimes parenthood makes us refocus, and that may mean going out on their own. It may mean going for a promotion, but ultimately it's about having the opportunity to safely talk about those concerns and issues, contextualize those issues, and actually work through them in an action focused way. But I'd say the big thing at the moment is around mental load is a massive, massive part. And that can be mental load in the workplace. It's not necessarily just a mental load at home.
Sure. What success story are you most proud of?
Oh, I had to think about this one.
Okay, nice. We like setting a challenge.
Yeah. Every client comes to me with a totally different requirement for their version of success. But I think the one that really struck me recently was a mum. She'd returned to quite a large organisation after her second parental return, maternity leave. Confidence was really, really low. And by the end of the work together, not only she applied for a promotion, she'd actually been invited onto quite an exclusive women's leadership group.
Yeah.
So I think every single, the coaching me, every single person is always a success. But I think the thing that's really important with the work that I do is that actually success doesn't have to be growth. Success sometimes can be paring things back, and success can actually be calmness and sustainability.
Nice. I really like that. Claire, you have 3 children and a very successful career. How has your identity changed throughout your life, would you say?
That's a really interesting question. And I think I'm a lot more empathetic, certainly. I think I'm a lot more understanding of other people and their challenges. I think another sort of aspect of motherhood was it's one of those points in your life where you mix with a lot of people again. So there's certain stages in your life where people are open to meeting new people and establishing new friendships, and I think that's one of the lovely outcomes. I've got a really tight-knit group of friends, other mums who all had babies at about the same time and from all different backgrounds as well. So I think it gave me a new perspective in terms of understanding other people's challenges.
Sure.
There's also that sort of aspect of feeling like you have a purpose. I never really, when parents said that before, I never really understood it. And I thought, well, I already have a purpose. It's not going to change me. But actually, it really does, because, you've got to sort of, first of all, be that role model. So, you want your kids to really see that, you're leading a fulfilling life, but also, it's about being able to provide for them, and it's about being able to, keep the food on the table at the same time as well. So, I think it's given me that sort of sense of empathy and sense of purpose, sense of understanding. I think I'm probably quite motherly at work as well.
I would say so.
So I think I've, taken that into my professional persona, really wanting to explain the why behind things. I guess my kids are always asking the why. So I've kind of adopted that into, how I'm communicating in business as well, and really thinking about people's personal journeys. So, their long-term journey in terms of coming into our business, being able to, have all the tools that they need to succeed, really conscious that, we employ people at the beginning of their careers, like I was. And, if that was my son or daughter, how would I want them to be able to progress and learn and develop? And there's a lot of talk about, differences in generations, and I don't always buy into that. I think it's about, being able to, treat people coming into the business as much as you would want your son or daughter to be treated and given the same opportunities. So it's given me really that sense of perspective, which, again, I didn't expect to gain from becoming a mum.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense. And Clara, would you agree, or? I
sort of look back on my life as a working parent, and I can sort of see those transitions all the time. I think I went into self-employment 9 years ago, not realising that our youngest daughter had additional needs.
Okay.
She's autistic and ADHD. And actually what's been really interesting for me is watching the evolution of how people aren't compartmentalising their life anymore. And that's been really nice. I started helping people with their jobs in 2001, and we were never as open about all the different identities and the roles that we had. Everybody was expected to leave their home life at the door, and all these types of things. But actually being able to see that evolution of acknowledging the responsibilities that people have. And the one thing that I see with the work that I do is ultimately people want to be in a job that they enjoy, and employers want people to enjoy the work they do. And if you can bring that whole person in and talk about being a parent and talk about the needs of being a parent and all of that it entails, it just makes life a little bit more enjoyable.
That's really interesting, Clara, because I was thinking about this. And there was this old sort of cliche of being a working mum. When you're at work, you have to pretend you don't have children. And when you're with your children, you have to pretend you don't have work. And that is how it used to be. Yeah. But, absolutely, you're so right. There's a lot more understanding about the whole person and all of their motivations and all of the sort of pulls on their time and their energy, which I think is a fantastic step forward. And I've seen that. You must have seen that. Your children are older than mine, but you must have really seen that. And, certainly for me, spend 5 minutes or more with me and I'll be getting out pictures of my kids. There's no pretense that I don't have, that responsibility. So, yeah.
The pandemic made a massive shift with that. We had to work in ways we couldn't even imagine. And, because of the needs of my youngest, a sign on the door saying, "Don't come in, Mom's on a call," she wouldn't
care. It's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
You're her mum and that's what she wants.
Exactly. She has no impulse control, which she will admit herself. So quite often I'd be on calls with clients and my daughter would walk in and I'd come and say hello. I remember pitching to a large organisation. I was like, "Look, I hope you don't mind. She wants to come and show you her drawing." And actually what's really interesting for me as somebody who's quite particular with who she works with, if an organisation respond to me being a loud, active mother, I'm not going to want to work with them because they're not actually going to support their own staff.
I agree.
So I think there's been a massive shift around that, a force of necessity, which none of us would have ever predicted, but it's just brought all of those lives so much closer together. And it's not just parenthood, it's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything that we do.
I love seeing my colleagues' kids on camera. If I get a child one in, I almost have parasocial relationships with them at this point, I see hello, Jacob, or hello, whatever. But I remember throughout this whole conversation, I obviously can't relate. I'm not a mother or a parent, but I've seen some of my colleagues, deliver big meetings first thing on a Wednesday morning and they're swinging their kid around on their hip. And I find that endearing, I think that's super impressive. And I would struggle to relate to someone who wouldn't like that or wouldn't tolerate that, if that makes sense. 100%. Maybe looking back retrospectively, what advice would you give to someone who maybe is facing distress about like a loss of identity? I'll go you first, Claire.
I totally understand that, and I think I've talked a little bit about the sort of shock I felt when I first went on maternity leave. I think you have to understand that it's not a loss of identity, it's a change. In identity, and learn to embrace that. Otherwise, it will be really difficult. So, all the positives that motherhood gives to you, I think, not just the lovely, happy things, but the resilience, the problem solving, being able to, manage the needs of somebody who isn't particularly reasonable. That's a great skill to have.
I can't always communicate the best either. Yeah.
So, I think it's thinking about, look, this isn't a loss of identity. This is a change in identity. And if I have really, thought about myself more in a work identity, then understanding that motherhood means that I've got quite a strong home identity as well, and balancing those. But you've got to be able to embrace that and understand it, and things will change, and understanding the change, and it's okay to feel as if you're not quite sure, whether you like it as well. I think we're a lot more open these days to talking about the difficulties about becoming a mum, whereas I think perhaps in the old days, and Clara, you might it was all about, well, it's going to be wonderful and it's going to be rainbows and sunshine and everything's going to be fine, whereas I think women are a lot more confident these days about talking about, well, actually this bit is really tough.
Yeah.
This is difficult, or I feel that this is a challenge. And I think it's about employers being open to understanding that, and, not people not feeling that they have to conceal if they're having a difficult time, or if they're, feeling a bit of a loss of a sense of identity as well.
Of course. What would you say to someone who is experiencing mum guilt and feels anxious about returning to work? Mum guilt, to be honest, is something would you say a buzzword? A term I hear a lot online and hear people speaking about. So maybe if one of you wouldn't mind giving a little definition, and then we can go in and sort of talk about what you feel about it, or what you would say to them people.
I'm happy to lead on that one. I like Brené Brown's take on guilt. And guilt is an emotion that communicates you want to make a change. And I think quite often we are told that, feeling guilty about the things that we have to do and the decisions that we have to make is a problem. But actually guilt is, I always say with every single client that I work with, emotions are communication. And actually, if you can look at guilt as a signal that something is happening that you don't like, and understanding what you can control. And sort of hark back a little bit to, what Claire was saying around identity, hit the nail on the head. Motherhood, parenthood is a change. It's a massive transition. And we all go through these different life transitions and expect that those transitions will change us. Mm-hmm. But as a society, it's like, well, you've chosen to become a parent, just suck it up. But if you've, even if you've got a dog, or you move house, or you move jobs, everyone expects you to change through that experience. So when it comes to guilt, I think it's remembering that it is a notification that you want to change something. So lean on, well, what is it that I want to change, and what can I control? Is it the time that I spend? Is it the energy that I spend? And learning that it is a journey. A journey. We've talked about this before. You're evolving. Yeah. So sometimes things happen. Sometimes you respond in a way that you're not happy with, or you get pulled in two different directions. And I think that as being an elder stateswoman, as a parent in this room, I don't know how much my 18-year-old would agree, but the one thing that we've always done really well is contextualise decisions and contextualise things, and always took the and. I can feel guilty about having to work and also enjoy what I'm doing. Yeah. Both of those things are okay. But I think quite often mum guilt is simplified, and that's where it becomes a little bit complicated to manage.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Claire?
Yeah, I think certainly, my children are better off when I'm feeling fulfilled and feeling as if I am having grown-up conversations as well. And that's not to say, I have friends who've chosen, not to go back to work and, took, a couple of years out to be full-time mums, and that's fantastic. That wasn't for me. I knew that pretty early on, but it's better for my children that I am fulfilled professionally and have the chance to be a little bit in control of my day. But that's not to say, I don't miss them when I'm not with them. Of course, yeah. Which is completely normal. What I would say is, don't try and overcompensate for the mum guilt by then at the weekends trying to pack loads of stuff in, and I've got to be super mum, and we're going to go to the zoo, and then we're going to go to the park, and then we're going to go to the cafe, and then we're going I just, give yourself a bit of time and space, because actually what your children value is your attention and spending time with you. So in a way, when you don't have as much time to spend with your children, you probably put more effort in. Yeah. You can probably, think about, actually, I'm going to make this really focused, but we don't have to be doing all the fancy sort of trips and activities. We can sit together and, have breakfast together, and, depending on how old they are, have a little conversation, or just watch them spread food all over their face or whatever. And so, try not to be super mum at the weekends, or times when you're not working. Try not to overcompensate, because you'll just burn yourself out.
Can I tell a little story related to that? I think it sums it up really well. Please. So when my eldest was about 10, I was running out of content ideas for my blog. So I said, I would like you to write me a blog, right, Grace, about what you think about me as a working parent. So she sat down and wrote it. And the one thing that stood out for me was, she said that the good thing about me working was that we could go get cake ingredients anytime we wanted to bake a cake.
Love that.
And I think, it's what Claire just said. It totally sums it up. We think we know what our kids want and need, but they want presents, as in our physical presents, not stuff. And they want options and opportunity. And I think mum guilt can make us think we're never quite doing enough, when actually just being there and, you know, being in the moment and quality time when we're there. And, you know, as we've talked about before, role modelling. Yeah. You know, I want both my girls to know one of my children wants to be a parent and the other one does not at all. But I want them to know that, you know, when you become a mother, it's your life grows, it doesn't reduce. Yeah. But I always love rolling that little story out, because I think I was like, she's going to think about all of these things. She just wanted cake ingredients.
Yeah. Do you ever feel pressures from other mums as well, or do you feel that pressure just sort of coming from the kids?
I think as mums, the pressure comes from comparison.
Okay.
So the pressure never came from another mum judging me. The pressure came from me thinking that other mum was judging me. And in reality, everybody thinks everyone's judging them, but nobody's judging anybody, because we're judging ourselves. And it was just with age and experience. The benefit I had with my eldest is there was a lot less social media around. So I didn't have the access to people's sort of highlight reels through my phone.
Of course.
But yeah, age definitely developed a different perspective on that for me.
Yeah. To both of you, did you face any struggles when you went back to work? And what about in the years that followed?
My second return, I really struggled. And actually now with hindsight, I think I had postnatal depression.
Okay.
I didn't really realise it at the time because it came out as anxiety. And I think not enough is communicated around that. My youngest was a pregnancy after a late loss. So there was definitely an added layer of complication, shall we say, about, you know, returning with all of that. And I really left it too late it got quite bad before I spoke to my manager about how I was feeling. And actually just opening up and having an honest conversation was amazing. And ironically, you know, as I've highlighted before, we sort of came to understand that my youngest had additional needs from about 3 or 4. Once, you know, when you're in a little bubble at home, you know, quite a neurodiverse group of people, you don't really notice it. And ironically, I don't know how I would have coped with what she needed from me if I wasn't self-employed. There would need to be quite a output-driven, exceptionally flexible, open-minded organisation for the flexibility that I need for her right now. So, it's been an interesting time.
Yeah. What about you, Clara?
I think, you know, I was lucky. I had a manager who was a mother, who had children, who totally understood and, you know, had those sort of understanding of, you know, worrying about my brain not working properly. And so I think my main anxiety was the first time I went back. And then I sort of, for the second and third times, because we went for a third as well, for the second and third times, it was like, no, I know I can do this. Yeah. You know, I'm going to have this anxiety, but I know I can click back in and, you know, it doesn't take long, especially if you've been with a company for an amount of time. And you've
23 years.
And you've got your network and you know who to reach out to and say, what's changed? Is this the same? Who should I speak to about this? I think also, you know, something for employers to bear in mind is while people are on maternity leave, everybody is different about how much contact they want to have. You know, some people will want to know, you know, what's going on and having regular catch-ups, which will help them when they come back in. Other people just, and I've seen this, just want to switch off and say, no, I'm in mum zone now. Yeah. I just want to switch off. And when I come back, I'll find that all out. And I think that can help to inform, you know, how you're going back. So I think it's really useful for employers to say, you know, what level of contact you want? Yeah. And understand that might change. I mean, I would have probably said before my first maternity leave, I want to know every week what's been happening. But actually, when I got into it, it was like, no, I want to switch off and enjoy this time. And so, but, you know, having some contact at least, you know, the month before you're preparing to go back, just, you know, what's happening, you know, what's changed, what are going to be the main topics that I'm going to be working on. I think that can help to take away some of the anxiety for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. The gender pay gap is still very much a thing, and there is an earnings gap between women with and without children. Is there a tax on motherhood?
100%. And there's a pension gap as well. It doesn't just, you know, it doesn't just stop there. And I think, you know, things are getting better. I would like to see the gender pay gap reporting much more stringently enforced. But, you know, you see it all the time, you know, the expectation. And I think a lot of it is, it's a systemic thing. It's not just about parity on pay. It's a systemic thing around, you know, quite often mothers being the default parent. You know, we've got a massive cost of living crisis around childcare. You know, I have clients that are, you know, saying, I can't afford to have another child, you know, and I've been doing this for a long time, and that's a very, very new conversation. So there is a lot that can be done by an organisation in terms of putting parity around the pay, around actually talking about, you know, parents, not just mothers. I think it's an important thing to highlight as well, to have an expectation around how people return when they return. You know, I always sort of talk about, again, it was a while ago, but when I was pregnant with our eldest, everybody before I even had her was asking me what I was going to do about work. Nobody asked my husband. Nobody asked my husband. I hadn't even had her yet. So yeah, there's definitely an issue there. And we can see, you know, there's recent research have come out, you know, where partners and dads are more involved in childcare, women are able to re-enter the workforce early. When childcare is better funded and provided, it helps all of that. So I think quite often the rhetoric's quite simplified, and puts a lot of responsibility on an employer. Okay. But that is just part of a wider systemic problem. And, you know, let's see how things are going to change after the recent shift in government.
And that's really interesting that you talk about, you know, the difference between men and women. Actually, we have a role reversal at home. So my husband is the main carer for our children, which enables me to be able to travel and be a lot more flexible with my work. And I'm really aware that not a lot of women have that. Although I would say when we had our first child, so he's 11 now, it was when he would then take him to the toddler groups when I was back at work, he would feel like, oh, I'm the only dad here. It didn't bother him. He's quite comfortable with that. But by the time we had our third, that was really common. And I was actually at my children's primary school the other day, and I would say in the reception class, I'd say it was about 60% of the parents picking kids up were the dads. So that's really changed. I think that's also come from home working after the pandemic. Sure. Yeah. So it's really nice to see how that balance has shifted. And we're no longer, I mean, we're here talking about motherhood, but actually, you know, this is as much about fatherhood as well. Yeah. So
I've seen a similar thing. Having evolved over the years at the school gate, I've definitely seen a shift. However, when I'm talking to mums, it doesn't always necessarily play out. So it might be that the dad does do the pick up and drop off, but then there's no other involvement in other times. So I think, you know, we need to look at ultimately really good investment in childcare, really good consideration for the cost of being a stay-at-home parent. You know, I think there's some information came out of America, and I'm sure if you were to pay for the roles that a stay-at-home parent has, I think it's between like $80,000 and $100,000 a year. You know, there's not enough consideration giving into that. So yeah, there's a lot more to it than what I think we can do in this podcast.
Don't get started about the mental load as well.
Yeah,
that's another topic.
That's another massive topic.
Like, I have time. We can be here for hours if you want. But going back to work and going back to that career journey, would we say we can still move up the career ladder if we're working reduced hours, if we're balancing motherhood, fatherhood, anything like that?
I very much come from the position that a lot of people that I work with, they don't have aspirations to go up the career ladder. They want work that they feel purposeful for. They want work where they feel like they can have energy for their family and their own well-being afterwards. They want work that is actually well paid. And I think that there's definitely proof out there. You know, Time Wise used to do a top 50, which was amazing. You know, the Green Party leaders, a job share. There is absolutely no doubt that there are models out there all the time where people can, you know, a bit like the earlier question, as long as the infrastructure and the culture of an organisation respect outcome rather than bums in seats. So there's absolutely no doubt for that. However, I think there is still an assumption that success is career progression up a ladder. But actually, what about subject depth? What about becoming a subject expert? You know, so there's definitely, you know, I've seen a shift of a lot of people come to me. They're like, I don't necessarily want to go up the next ladder. I want to be doing something I enjoy really, really well. And actually, I would actually say for the fourth industrial revolution, which we're knee deep in now, that's the career success.
I mean, I have to say, in my experience, both in the UK and in Germany, some of our most successful recruitment consultants are part-time working mums.
Yeah.
And, from talking to managers about this, what they say is they come in, they do their hours, they're really organised, they know exactly what they need to do, great, people skills and, consistent, fantastic performance as well. So, but like you said, Clara, I think we have some work to do around progressing up the career ladder if people want to do that, and recognising that part-time hours does not mean part-time commitment. But yeah, it's really interesting. But certainly I can see how things have shifted and changed. And I think as we're now in a world which isn't necessarily always about a quantity of work, it's about a quality of work and managing people on outcomes and performance. I think things will just get better and part-time workers will be more recognised. And certainly I would like to see more job sharers, because I've seen some fantastic job shares over the years where, you've got people that can work together and deliver great results.
Yeah, shouting out Lisa and Minnie in Brook Street.
Yes, that was who I was thinking of. Yeah,
lovely job showers. I hear so much about them, and I've only recently just started working with Lisa, and they are wonderful, really, really wonderful. Clara, you're a big advocate for flexible working. How has it helped you, and do you have advice for others who are maybe looking for a better work-life balance?
So when I went out on my own, I knew straight off that one of my success measures was having a 4-day week. And not only is it a 4-day week, it is a school hours, term time only 4-day week. But it's really helped me around my, personal well-being. If we're going to be blunt from a marketing perspective, if I'm working with people that need flexibility and want a good work-life balance, I need to be able to demonstrate that. But I think what I touched on a little bit earlier was it's helped with our childcare. We don't have any childcare costs. It's helped with being around for my family and my girls in a way that I didn't expect, that I didn't, know. My eldest has just gone through her A-levels. So there was a few days I needed to drop her off because the bus was running late, or she needed someone to talk to. But actually it's just been the ability to work very, very well in the time that I have. I think that, and it's a bit like how I felt before having children and after having children, where I was like, what did I used to do with my time? It's the same now, that actually I get probably just as much done in the hours that I have than I used to do. I used to work 4 days, so I've always worked 4 days pretty much consistently since becoming a mum. I had a small window where I worked 5 days but flexibly before I had my youngest. And ultimately it's about, you get what you need done in that time. You make better choices, you make better quick decisions, you're much more open to trying new things, because you have a clear idea of what your outcome needs to be. And I think, again, quite often people think, oh, well, you need flexible working operationally because you're a parent. But actually I'd argue that every single person, to have a fulfilling life, I'm a co-director of a social enterprise, and that was actually a really important thing that I wanted to do when I went out, was to do some volunteering. It's evolved in a way that I never imagined. I thought I'd be doing like once a week reading in a library, not running another business. But that has enabled me to do that. And actually, I always talk about an exercise I do with my clients called the rocking chair exercise, where you sort of fast forward to the latter part of your life, think about what you want to do and the places you want to be, and the impact you want to leave. And actually, no one usually talks about work, but work becomes the facilitator for those things to happen. And actually, time. I think we've talked about a lot of different things, but time's really precious. And actually, if you're able to use it in a way that you get to the end of the day and think, I've had a good day, that's what I want, and that's what I've been able to carve out. Who knows what it'll look like in the future, but it works for me right now.
Do you have anything to add, Claire?
I think, certainly these days it feels like last week it was the last week of my children's term, and there was so many different things happening, and thinking, oh, okay, if I can go to this concert and, work a little bit around that. And I think schools aren't always that understanding that we work.
You're on their time, don't you?
So it's great to have an employer where you can say, look, I'm popping out for this concert or this sports day or this leavers service or all of the many things that happen. And I think it's really important for parents to feel that they're not missing out on that, and that companies have that understanding, even if it's not, a formal flexible working policy, that there's a bit of give and take.
That life just happens. And you want to be there for these moments. That makes complete sense. And then to add to that, Claire, How would you say that employers can better support working mums or working parents in general?
I think being really open. I think it comes down to managers having a really good relationship with their people and understanding, what the pressures are, what their motivations are, what their situations are. Certainly, people have different levels of wanting to share. I'm quite an open book, and I will talk to anybody about anything. But, people being able to feel that they can talk about these things without judgment, that they can say, look, I'm having a tough time because, my child's ill, or I'm going to need to take some time off because of this. And then nobody's hiding anything. Everyone could be open. And actually, I think you get a lot more out of people by giving them, a bit of trust and a bit of give and take, and you get a lot more loyalty from your people as well. So I think that's really important.
Sure. And Clara, would you have anything to add? How do you think?
I have lots.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I think first of all, which is probably going to sound a bit strange, bearing in mind what I do, is to not think about parents, think about staff. So if you have, I think quite often in some organisations when they talk a lot about parents, internally parents can be pitted against non-parents. But actually, if you think about every single person in your organisation will have some type of caring responsibility, be it a child, be it a parent, be it a friend, be it an animal, be it a community. And if you start considering what that person needs to enable them to do that, like Claire said, that transparency, that openness. And it's thinking about the policies and the procedures that you have. So I come across an awful lot of organisations that are like, we've got a flexible working policy, but nobody implements it, or it's not very well understood.
Is it that flexible?
Exactly, you can apply for flexibility, but we're never going to actually accept it. So it's thinking about those types of things. It's also considering, as we've talked about before, parents don't just need support when they return. There is consistent support all the way through. We've talked about school. My youngest had quite a tricky transition into secondary school over the last year. And, if I was having to talk to an employer, it would have been a very different dynamic. And it's also thinking about the role models, and Claire's mentioned that as well, is talk about your circumstances, have really strong role models within the organisation, leave loudly. I always talk about on my out of office, I'm very open about, I don't look at my emails when I'm not there. This is when I'm back. And if you're a big enough organisation, actually you have a whole group of people that already exist that can give you the answers. Parent networks, peer groups, mentors, those types of things, and ask your staff what they need. And obviously that's a bit weird coming from me, where I'm like, career coach, come and employ me. But the reality is you've got people within your organisation that often are the last people that are asked about what they need. So don't go about getting loads of consultants in until you've actually had a conversation with the people that are actually doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what advice would you give to someone who wants to start a family but is fearful of the change to their life and career?
It is a change. I think it's acknowledging that, but it's change is scary. So again, I think we've talked about before, think about what you can control. Think about what you're fearful of. Consider the network that you have around you. One thing people don't do enough of, I think, is actually talk about parenthood before they become a parent. So if you've got a partner, talk about responsibilities, role models, finances, hobbies, how you want your life to look. Have conversation, understand what your organisation looks like, but acknowledge the fact that it is a change. And actually, change is scary. The brain likes to keep us safe. The brain likes things that are predictable. So the change is a very human reaction to it. So understand what it is you can control and actually put some things into place. Is it finances? Is it working pattern? And just be very aware that you will always look back and realise the change wasn't as scary as it felt in the moment.
Absolutely, I would echo that. And it is a big change, but I think embrace all the positives about it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but really certainly enriches your life. And make sure you've got that support network, and who you can turn to when things get really tough. And you've got good relationships at work, people who can you can talk to about your difficulties as well. So try not to be scared. Maybe I've given too many horror stories.
Maybe don't
listen to me. But yeah, try not to be scared. Understand that it's going to be a change, but there's going to be, a lot of fantastic, positive experiences that you'll take from it.
Yeah. Thank you both for today. I really got a lot out of that, honestly. And you don't need to hear it from me, but I'm sure you are fantastic role models for year 2 and year 3. But before I let you both go, if someone at home is returning to work soon, what's one thing that they can do this week to help them prepare?
That's a good question. I think the best thing they can do is block out some time for themselves. So rather than thinking about everything that they've got to do for everybody else, make sure you grab your diary, you think about the thing that gives you some rest. There's 7 different types of rest, so it's not always necessarily about sleep. It could be spiritual rest, it could be connecting with nature, and block some time out every single day where the only person you're focusing on is yourself.
Clara, I'm going to come to you for some coaching. I love what you're talking about. I don't think I've got one thing. I mean, I think probably think about what you're going to wear, get a haircut, try the clothes on. They might not fit. Think about how you want to present yourself, because certainly for me, if I feel like I'm wearing work clothes and I've got my makeup on and, it puts me more in the zone. So even if I'm not feeling it that much, if I can, put that sort of persona forward, I feel a bit more prepared. Think about your routine, and then any sort of time that you're going to spend on, getting your children ready, double or triple that as part of your schedule, because trying to get them ready and get everything together will take a lot longer than you think. So give yourself enough time and space. And I think I would echo what you said, Clara, of just taking some time on your own. I think certainly, and I don't know if you agree with this, but just even the pleasure of being able to nip out for a sandwich at lunchtime and think, oh my gosh, I've got all this freedom, or and this is even worse, but to go to the toilet on your own. I'm thinking I would, I was probably going into the office, and going to the toilet and looking really excited about going to the toilet. But it's those things that actually think about those positives, like I'm going to be in the city and I'm going to be able to get a sandwich and walk around town for a few minutes and feel like a grown-up again. And, as much as it might be really difficult to leave your little one behind, try and think about those positive things as well.
Yeah. 100%. And both of your answers had the same thing, and it was all about yourself. It wasn't about the kids. It wasn't about anybody else. It was about doing something for you. So everyone take note of that. Clara, where can our listeners follow you?
So it's the Balance Collective, .co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as Clara Wilcox, Return to Work Coach, and on Facebook as the Balance Collective as well. So on Instagram. Nice. I think that's everything.
Do you want to plug your LinkedIn as well?
Certainly. I'm more than happy to have more followers on LinkedIn. I'm Claire Morgan and I'm Head of Business Performance at ManpowerGroup in Germany.
That is the end of today's episode. I just want to say a big thank you to you, Clara, and you, Claire. And if you're looking for a new role, why not check out Brook Street online for their latest job openings? There may just be a dream role on there waiting for you. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend, and remember to follow People First on all your favourite podcast platforms. See you later. Well done. That was so nice.